Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Lynda, and I'm originally from Michigan, now living in the St. Louis metro area. I'm a college coach with School Match for You and have a daughter at University of Chicago.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Julie and I discuss an article entitled, States Are Taking on Few College Cost. Who is picking up the bill? That article appeared in Higher Ed Dive. Lynda and Lisa will answer a SpeakPipe question, and it's about the National Merit Scholarship Program. Gloria and Terry Crawford are continuing their deep dive into helping us understand glimpse videos with part 3 of 5. And finally, Fabrizio Delosio is back for part 3 of 5 for a deep dive into understanding the University of Tennessee at Knoxville.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Julia, good to have you back.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, you know what? I missed these in the news discussions. Like, we went to so many questions for our listeners. Like, there were about 4 months where we were running 2 questions and we didn't do articles. And I miss discussing articles. So it's nice to have you back. All right. So today we have an article from Ben, and I know I'm going to butcher his name, Unglesbee. He's not a writer I'm familiar with. He's a senior reporter for Higher Ed Dive. Ben, if you're listening, sorry that I botched your name. But it says states are taking on fewer college costs. Who is picking up the bill? Julia, we're in the money talk, just like last week.
I know.
2 weeks in a row. So basically what this article talks about is how, the Great Recession in 2008, it hit colleges really, really, really hard. And all of a sudden they had less money. You have less tax dollars coming in. You had shrinking endowments. And so they decreased their portion of what they contributed toward the student bill. Just like in a family, if you're a 2-income earner family and then you lose 1 income, you have to make some changes. And it talks about how the state was covering 49.2% of costs in 2008. And now here we are fast forwarding about 17 years later, and states are covering 39.6%. So you're down a full 10%, 17 years after the great financial crisis. And I mean, think about it. If let's say a school is $40,000, that's 10% is $4,000. So like, where's that money going to come from? And so we still haven't fully recovered. The other thing that the article talks about is there's a lot of disparity from one state to the next based on how much of a priority they make higher ed in their own budget. So it gave examples, and some of the examples it gave were Alaska. Alaska is a really good place to go to if you want to have your state contribute to the cost of college, because in Alaska, 67% of the bill is getting covered by the state. And then it talked about some other really generous states, and they mentioned 3, New York, North Carolina, and Connecticut. Those are all states where more than 50% of the cost is being covered by the state. But then it talked about the opposite, some states that are not funding public education. And some of the ones they highlighted in the article were Indiana, Arizona, West Virginia, and Vermont. And for those 4 states, less than 1/3 of the costs of college is being covered by the state. So what were your thoughts about this article, Julia?
That sort of tracks with what I feel like I've been seeing. Like, and it's even so. I'm actually a graduate from college in 2008, right? So it's so funny to me that so much of what I know in my world had everything to do with the recession. And so like I don't know what life was like before 2008, right?
That's your year.
And I'm also coming from a state that has, arguably some of the greatest investments in education, including higher education. So in Massachusetts, about a month and a half ago, the governor made all community college free to get a degree if you don't have one yet. So these are things I haven't really known beforehand. But I would say as a counselor, I've seen this become more of an issue, even in Massachusetts as time has gone on, where I am most of the time, my students with moderate to high need might be choosing private institutions because in the end, the state is not footing as much money as some of these private schools will, that will basically be, they have the luxury of keep adding on merit aid and scholarships, that even if the sticker price the sticker price at UMass Amherst right now all in is I think just around $38,000. And I live in Massachusetts. There's plenty of regional colleges, plenty of colleges that are really selective as well. And you could go to, even if the sticker price is more, a lot of my students are going to regional colleges where they're paying probably more like 45, and then they get a few more things off, and it just seems like a better return on their investment. So I wasn't surprised to hear this, but it is making me nervous, especially. I do think that this is a clear sign of what we're going to see in the future, potentially, under a new administration, where there's just less and less money. And colleges are also, some state schools are getting really creative they don't have enough money to really afford. Mark, you and I talk about this all the time, is that my in-state students can't really go to the UMass system. Even with a Pell Grant, it is still not affordable enough that some other private colleges. And so we've also seen the UMass Amherst, the flagship here, is admitting way more students out of state. And I'm looking at the GPAs of those students, and they're nowhere near the students in my state. And that's because they don't have to foot the bill for those students, or not as much. And so I understand at the end of the day, it's a business. And when you're getting less and less federal funding, you're less and less able to serve the people of your state and serve low income folks.
Yeah, before we had this meeting today, I did a counseling session with, as you like to say, somebody from some of the wow towns around Boston. And we were talking about this exact thing. I was talking about how institutional priorities and states' policies can vary so much. So you can have some states that have really decided to prioritize their in-state applicants, and they have more generous admit rates and special funding. I mean, look at California. I mean, not only in the UC system do schools like UCLA, San Diego, and Berkeley, do they need to stay around that 80%? They've done a graduated thing. Eventually, it needs to get to 18%, but they're giving a little bit of time to get there, out of state, and the rest in state. But then they have a very generous Cal Grant program,
right,
and a super generous community colleges free program. So they really prioritize their in-state. Then there's, like you said, there's the UMasses, and there's other places like Alabama, 5 of the last 6 years, more than 60% out of state. There's other places that are saying, you know what? I'll tell you how we'll get our dollars. We'll tap out of state, where they pay 2.5 to 3 times tuition. So in some cases, it's easier being in state. Some cases, it's easier being out of state.
Right.
It really depends. But I was also thinking about this article, and I was thinking, no wonder people feel financial pressure around college, and sentiments toward college are turning so negative, because we already know just the cost of college is going up at an astronomical rate, higher than the cost of healthcare, like definitely higher than wages are going up. But then on top of that, you have the state picking up less of the costs,
right,
while your costs are going up.
There's no solution here.
And there's a lot of pressure on state budgets because this is the mindset a lot of state governments have toward college. They see college almost like discretionary item in their
Right.
budget. And they
Yep.
and they say that for a few reasons. They say like, okay, we have to support our police. We have to support our fire department. We have to fix these potholes in the road. And within education, we're going to prioritize K-12 because how in the world are we going to get funding for that? But the mindset with college is either we can pass it on to parents, and students, or the loan system out there, which is still passing it on to parents and students. Same thing,
Yeah.
right? And so it's not seen as something that is as urgent, partly because they feel like, the people that really want it are going to find a way and they're going to come up with the money. And then they have other things like a lot of states have, you see this in the Northeast and the Midwest. You have, unionized states that have put really expensive pension plans in place that their labor unions have negotiated that really cost like multi billions of dollars on the budget for the state. I mean, Illinois has probably been the poster child for this. And they're on the line for these budget cuts. And the problem, where it really gets tough is when the state is having an outmigration and a declining population. So you have a declining tax base,
Right.
funding these long-term pension commitments. And you're going to have some irate workers if you turn around and tell them that this pension you thought you're getting is going to get cut. So, so it's not just a matter of do state governments think higher ed is a good thing. It's a matter of, okay, justifying it over other things like funding for K-12, security, pensions. Some people have huge deferred maintenance and then natural disasters and just all kinds of different things coming at their budgets. I mean, obviously I'm a huge believer of higher ed. Like, I do not like that higher ed seems to be deprioritized. But I do think it's important that we have a conversation about like all the forces and factors that are vying for that money, that are also like pretty worthy causes.
Right.
So yeah, unless you go to complete privatization, like what are you going to do with your K-12 schooling? I know a lot of it is local property taxes. I get it, but there's still state funding there. So yeah, so that's one reason why people are feeling the pressure. And then the more you pay, the more you expect.
Right.
The more you expect. So then if you turn around and, there's one study out there that says more than 50% of adults with degrees are working in jobs where they didn't need the degree to have the job that they're doing. Like stuff like that doesn't help. That doesn't really help the,
No.
the rep.
No.
So,
No.
yeah. So, yeah, you and I are huge defenders of higher ed, but it is under assault and, it's understandable why, especially just off the money stuff alone.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Good conversation as usual, Julia.
All right. Money, money, money.
Money, money, money. See you next week.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hey, Lynda, how are you doing today?
Hey, Lisa, doing great today.
Oh, well, we're here today to answer another question from a listener. And this comes from a longtime podcast listener, so thank you very much. And she has a question about national merit. So let's play it.
Hi, longtime listener. Greatly appreciate all of the education you do around the college admissions process for those of us who are trying to help guide our students. I have some questions about qualifying for national merit and the PSAT. So I know that you need to take the PSAT October of your junior year. And then I am wondering what additional requirements are there, such as another SAT, or potentially would an ACT qualify? And what is the time restriction in taking those next tests if the semi-finalist wants to try to qualify as a finalist for national merit? If you can walk me through the process, hold my hand, talk to me like I'm 3, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much. Bye.
So, Lynda, what do you think?
So it's confusing, right? The national merit. And I kind of have like this love-hate relationship with national merit because, as longtime listener probably knows, you really get one shot at it in October of junior year. And I've always felt it's like spelling bee, which I think spelling bees are the most anxiety inducing events ever. Because you get just one chance,
Yeah.
you get one chance. And with ACT and SAT, you can take it again. You're not happy with your score, you get to take it again. But for the PSAT that qualifies for national merit, you get one shot, and it's in October of your junior year.
Right.
So now I do want to clarify because some folks aren't aware of this. You can take that PSAT, which is just a practice SAT, more than one time. You can start taking it as early as 8th or 9th grade. There's a PSAT 8, 9. You can take it in your sophomore year if your school offers it. Not all schools do, and not all schools uh, publicize the PSAT in junior year or the potential benefits anyway. That's my love hate. You only get one shot.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, because it's like just like in a spelling bee, or if you want to watch something else, try going to a geography bee. That one's crazy. You have to draw pictures. But anyway, you only get one shot, and it kind of the luck of the draw on the questions that you get, right, that day. So depending on what questions, the College Board has decided to send out that day, that could be the difference between the cutoff points or not. And what's interesting is you have to get, certain scores, and the cutoffs are different for every state. So there might be a lower cutoff in Wyoming and a higher cutoff in New York, which is also, I think, maybe a little weird, but I guess I can understand that. Like perhaps the people in New York have more access to practicing and resources.
Yeah, and I believe the way they determine that is they take the top 2% of the state. So not only are the cutoffs different for each state, they can vary year to year. So let's talk about timeline a little bit. So if you decide to pursue this, you take the PSAT in October of your junior year. And then you don't find out until April, usually, I think, what those cutoffs are. And then in September of senior year, you get notified on who is a semifinalist or commended student. So I looked this up the other day. About 1.3 million students will take that PSAT in October of junior year. And 34,000 of them will become commended students. So they did great. But then 16,000 will become semifinalists. And these are less than 1% of high school seniors. And then about 15,000 of those. So the majority of them will become finalists, but you won't find out until spring of your senior year.
Yeah.
So it's a long, drawn out process.
Yeah, I had a student who qualified this year, which was great, but like having to fill out that application that we didn't know we were going to have to fill out in September while we're trying to get everything else done, like the timing, we can work a little on the timing there. And then, when in talking about his list, like we kind of got to figure that out now. Right. And so you might want to change it based on some of the scholarship opportunities that might be available if you qualify. But we don't know if he's going to qualify. And so it's sort of like, again, sort of just luck of the draw, random kind of crapshoot sort of thing.
Yeah, it is a process. And to qualify as a finalist, there are a couple of things. So you have to have that score on the PSAT, but then you have to have what's called a qualifying or a confirming test score. And that can be ACT or SAT. I know a longtime listener asked. And the timing for that is pretty broad. So it's really any time from fall of sophomore year to December of senior year. But I do not recommend taking ACT or SAT in December of your senior year. So you need to have a testing plan. Something to keep in mind is that they won't super score. So you can take this test, but you're not going to be able to cherry pick your scores for super scoring. And then, like you said, that application, which of course includes another essay.
Yeah, just what you need in September of your senior year, another essay.
Another essay. And I think it's about 500 to 600 words. So it's not insignificant. But there's a lot to go into it, and you do need a recommendation from your high school principal. But high school principals are thrilled to have national merit semifinalists or finalists. So that shouldn't be too tough for students. And you do need to be in your last year of high school. So if you decide to graduate early or not finish high school, which sounds crazy to me, that could throw a wrench in your plans. But you're right. I think there are some students out there who may decide, I'm okay just not pursuing that with high school or with the college application season. And I think that's because some students may look at it and decide it's not worth the effort.
Right, right. So there are some, schools that do offer, free tuition or a full ride, but they're not your, Ivy Leagues, and, plus Stanford, UFC, and Georgetown. I mean, there are some good schools, and it's something that you could definitely consider. Like Arizona State has a free ride. Baylor gives, I think, $22,000. Auburn, 10,500. Florida State, whole kit and caboodle. So that would be helpful. Fordham, it's tuition. But, like some schools just give like $2,000. So, and then, if you're not interested in any of the schools that are on their list, like you don't want to go to Alabama to go to school, even though it might be advantageous financially, then there might not be a point in bothering with filling it out.
Yeah, I think, and we've talked about this, there are a lot of myths around this. And while it is certainly a tremendous honor, I have had students that don't even include it in their activities or in their honors sections because they have other things. And when you are talking about those uber competitive schools, it's not really the differentiating factor. All that said, if you are chasing merit,
yeah, it could be good for you if you're willing to go to some of these schools.
This can be right, just absolutely a game changer. The one thing I do recommend to families is these awards can change year to year, depending on budgets, and they can be different for in-state versus out-of-state students. So take a look at that. But yeah, to your point, I know Texas Tech now offers full cost of attendance, which, I mean, you get to go to Patrick Mahomes' alma mater.
Yeah, I mean, Texas Tech has a lot of really like niche programs that are really good and a variety of different things. So there's no shade for Texas Tech, but it does not have maybe the name cachet of Princeton.
True, they do have a better football team.
Yeah, it just depends on what you want to value in life, right?
Yeah.
So,
but I do think if you are looking for a good college experience with big scholarship money, there are schools out there that will offer that. They just may be in the middle of the country and are not the Ivy League or top 10 schools. So I'm a fan of national merit. I just wish that you had more than that one day in October to qualify.
Yeah. And, I think otherwise, if your school offers it, you can just look at it as a practice test. for the SAT, and kind of maybe use it to decide, like, do I want to study the SAT or do I want to prep for the ACT because I hate this test? So you can use it as an experience like that as well, even if you're not going to qualify for any of the commended student positions or the semifinalist.
Yeah, and I do think that's important. It's a practice test, so it really shows you what you need to be working on if you want to take the test again. So, and I feel obligated to say this every time we talk about standardized testing. This test does not define you as a student, and
No.
it's just one test. And I kind of look at this as, do you qualify for national merit? Congratulations. Wonderful news. And you don't? Okay. You're still going to be successful. And there are plenty of options out there for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There shouldn't be like a high pressure thing about this. I mean, it's like that this test is literally a 1-day slice, 3 hours of your life. I mean, how would you like to otherwise be judged if we just took a random 3 hours of your life and, it could be the one where you're in a really pissy mood or whatever. And like, then everyone like judges you like, okay, Lisa's a total jerk. Look at those 3 hours. I will never consider any other information about her again. That's ridiculous, right? But that's kind of what the test does. So just, keep it in mind, like, it's just one thing. It's not the thing.
That's exactly right. Did we answer all of longtime listeners' questions?
I hope so.
I think so.
But
if not,
longtime listener, let us know.
let us know. But you can also go to nationalmerit.org and they have all the answers there. But if we didn't answer it sufficiently, let us know. And longtime listener, those are some of our favorite kinds of listeners. So
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Lynda, for all the information.
You bet.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, it's time for part 2 of my interview with Gloria and Terry Crawford. In part 2, Gloria shares the mechanics of how GLIMPS works and what costs are involved. Terry and Gloria answer the question, are there any students that should not submit a GLIMPS video? Terry and Gloria discuss whether some schools use GLIMPS as a test of demonstrated interest to see the students' level of engagement to try to ascertain or predict whether they may come. Gloria gives students advice about what colleges want in their GLIMPS video, and she shares some tips about how to know if what you are thinking about is too elaborate or too time-intensive. Listen and enjoy. Talk about a little, like, where are you at with numbers now? So I remember Duke sprung last year. I think Wash U came on last year, if I remember correctly. With you guys, I think Vanderbilt may be new this year. I've seen all these new schools pop up. So where you want to go over sort of who's accepting GLIMPS? Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah.
I know I gave you this question in advance. Like, who sort of came on last year? Who's sort of joined this year? Walk us through like some of the schools that are kind of accepting GLIMPS right now.
Yeah, we mentioned Duke, and Middlebury would be another first adopter. They were using it for their fly-in program first, and then realized, oh, this is an additional piece of information that's helpful for all of our application. And so a number of liberal arts colleges joined last year as well. But I kind of think the big new users, Vanderbilt, Northwestern, Brown, Chicago, Wash U. We also have Rice, and it's interesting because obviously those are kind of peers of Duke, but you also have like liberal arts colleges, College of the Holy Cross. You've got Occidental. You've got Swarthmore. A lot of liberal arts colleges are using it, and we're starting to see some like institutes of technology. So we've got like RPI, WPI, they use it. Rose-Hulman uses it. And then we've got also some publics are starting to talk about it. So Binghamton is a new big client who is going to be using it. So I am super excited to see this because it means that all types of students are actually recording. And that is the beauty of what we're seeing. When Questbridge started using it, we saw a certain demographic and a certain population of student recording. Obviously, when Duke was using it, we saw a certain kind of student.
Sure, of course.
And now, we're starting to see like these students who are recording for Rose-Hulman, RPI, I was telling Terry, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so refreshing because these are students who are very technical and
Sure.
very, like they're geeking out about something. And that is completely different than what we were seeing last year, but also super compelling. And back to that kind of, I hate demonstrated interest because I think it's just been that phrase has been totally, gamed or worked over too much. But being able to see that fit, the student doesn't need to say, I want to go to Rose-Hulman or RPI. Them telling that story already for an RPI admissions officer is like, yes, like, this is the type of person that I can see in the lab, that I can see joining this research project. That's the beauty of this kind of demonstrated, quote unquote, demonstrated interest. They're not having to say, you're my dream school. They're just having to be themselves and let the school realize, oh, you're the perfect fit for this class.
Go ahead, Terry.
Well, I was going to kind of talk more generally about the dynamics of how this material goes to colleges. So when you talk about, we're basically talking about colleges that have put us on their website or that have put us in their portal, and that's important, because that's one way that other colleges see the growing usage. But the real way that colleges see the growing usage is that a student will come and do it for Vanderbilt or Duke or Middlebury or Holy Cross or Rose-Hulman, and then that student will like it and will want to send it to multiple schools. I mean, there's kind of two ways that the things that we do grow. I mean, one is that colleges see other colleges doing it and they want to not be left out. They want to take advantage of the product or the data that comes along with that, whatever it might be. But the other way that we really grow is from the students enjoying the process and wanting to share that broadly. And so I don't, what we always tell people is to not get hung up on kind of, which school is using it, because we're going to help them send it everywhere. The very worst thing, all colleges know about it now. They're all thinking like, okay, how are we going to start using this in our process? The joke that we say is that, we can 100% guarantee that if you don't send it, they won't see it. That's what we can 100% guarantee. But otherwise, we're in the selective admissions world here. Like, colleges do what they want to do. We can it's not super. There's not a lot of value in you kind of trying to understand what happens in the inner sanctums of these colleges. I mean, some colleges are telling us, or even telling students when they're asked, like, yeah, how are you going to use Glimpse? They're saying, we don't know. And we don't know how we're going to use it because it's the first time that we're using it, but we think that there's some potential here. And so I don't want an advisor to students to kind of be hung up on like, oh, this college is going to use it, but this college is not. The real question is like, hey, does the student like it? If the student likes it, they should just send it broadly. They should send it everywhere. The one story that we often tell is that when we were first starting off in the international space, and of course we're growing, our interviews for international students was growing very quickly, and this was maybe year 3 or 4 that we were doing this, and we're going into an Ivy League admissions office, dean of admissions, and we get ready to walk in. It's a big step for us, they had no idea kind of what we had done. They were like, well, this is the time that we could meet, and so we flew cross country, on a red eye to make it for this meeting. And we come in, and as we're about to walk in, the dean goes, you don't have to pitch me on this. We're already using you. Oh, and wow. So, and that was just from go-getter students who had been like, hey, I want you to see, their international students who wanted to stand out in the process. And they said, I wanted to, that they wanted the college to see what they had done. And so it's the exact same process that's happening here. Counselors and IECs don't need to spend lots of time, I think, kind of researching what is happening internally with admissions offices, because that is literally changing by the week. But instead, it's really just a question for the students they're advising is like, look, this is something that we think is valuable. You've done a good job with this. You should just send, it's just a few more clicks, just send it everywhere, and who knows what's going to happen. It could be I can help you get in. It could be the difference for a merit scholarship. I mean, there are all these things that could happen. We hear all these stories all the time of we got this glimpse and everyone kind of crowded around and saw how great the student was, and we were they made us cry. Like it really had this level of impact.
Yeah, we had a story last year where an admissions officer told me that in committee he pulled up a video and it literally made everyone in the committee room tear up. And then there were other admissions officers in the room saying, why don't I have a glimpse for my students? And so I think, and it is, we know that this industry has been shaken up in the past 5 years, right? Between COVID and test optional and
ChatGPT. Yeah.
ChatGPT, like and FAFSA problems, like all sorts of things have really shaken up. And one admissions officer that I just saw at the College Board Forum was like, our yield models are completely shot. Like they're everything we had before, we don't know. So we're rebuilding our yield models. And they were saying that Glimpse could be a thing where that is a contributing data point in our rebuild of yield. And these admissions officers are all talking to each other. And so again, literally like last week we had another school add us to their website. So when people ask me what schools, I'm like, well, it's a moving target.
Yeah. I totally get it though, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? There's a reason why we say that, right? So there's a lot kind of in there, but when people see their competitors doing things and then students start asking them, hey, can I send Glimpse to you? Some of my schools, I can see how they're getting it, coming at it from both ways, right? It makes a lot of sense to me. Talk about QuestBridge, because and our listeners, regular listeners know we've done deep dives on QuestBridge, but QuestBridge is the number one provider of gifted and talented under-resourced students to the nation's wealthiest and most selective schools. They have 52 schools in their network. And some QuestBridge partners are taking as many as 100 of their kids a year between their match program, which is more like an early decision commitment to come, versus who they take in regular. So it's a big supplier for the Stanfords and the U Chicagos and the Emorys of where they're getting their, it's a multiracial income-based program, average income 38,000. So you tap into that network. That's 52 of the most selective schools in the country. So talk to us about how did you end up getting that QuestBridge partnership, and is it set up now so that any QuestBridge school could have access to it, or is it only the ones that are already using Glimpse, like the Northwesterns and the Vanderbilts and the Dukes?
I can talk about how we got it, and Gloria, why don't you talk about technically?
Okay.
Gloria can talk about technically how it works. The conversations with QuestBridge have been going on for years, so it is not something that just kind of sprang out of nowhere. Although, a lot of this is being in the right place at the right time. I mean, that is absolutely a big part of it. And I just think that QuestBridge, in a conversation that we had, maybe it was 6 months ago in San Francisco over lunch, just talking about how Glimpse could work for QuestBridge students. And of course, QuestBridge wants to serve its college partners, and there's a big overlap between their college partners and our college partners, however you want to define partners. I mean, they're much more of a kind of a partnership model, and that colleges pay them. It was they just saw the value, and they saw the value, I think, too, in that oftentimes with under-resourced students, they are inherently compelling, and they don't even realize how compelling they are. And oftentimes that might be, they're filming on the floor with their cell phone on the floor of their family's convenience store late at night, and you can, they're saying like, oh, here I am in my family's convenience store. I'm taking a break from my shift to film my Glimpse, and they talk a little bit about them, and then it just gives so much context to that student's life. And again, it's just the air that the student breathes. Like, they don't understand how compelling that video can be. Whereas to an adult that's making a decision, it's instantly apparent. And so QuestBridge wanted to capture some of that. They wanted to obviously provide their college partners with more information about their students. And we were a little bit just in the right place at the right time, and so we were able to do a pilot with them. Of course, it's we work with them technically as well to make sure that goes smoothly too. But it really is from that conversation that it led to them adopting it. And I'll say one kind of final thing about an under-resourced student coming to do Glimpse. I mean, it's very much, in many ways, it's even more accessible than going to write an essay on the Common App. Like, they can just pick up their cell phone. They're already recording videos on their cell phone, and it's just one more way to do that. It's a few clicks, and then they can send it to use as part of their QuestBridge application, or send it to any college that they're applying to. And so it's in many ways maybe the most accessible way that they can present themselves. And for some students, it's a way that they're very comfortable expressing themselves, very much in contrast to how essays maybe used to be done. And they're kind of this highly stylized way of writing that is really unique to the application process. Whereas this is not something which is necessarily unique. And so it gives an under-resourced student this chance to present themselves very authentically. And an under-resourced kid, by the time that they make it to an application process like QuestBridge, they're going to have a lot of very impressive things that they've already done that adults will instantly appreciate, but maybe the student doesn't even know. And that just makes them incredibly endearing, incredibly compelling in this medium. And I think that was one thing that was really gratifying to QuestBridge when they thought about using it.
Anything you want to add, Gloria?
Yeah, we had been in relationship with community-based organizations for a long time. For the past, pre-COVID, we were already starting to develop these relationships, knowing that student voice is particularly important for people who don't have counselors who can help them with that. And so when we talked to those CBOs initially about this idea that we had about adding video to the application, a lot of them were excited because they said, on paper, we try so hard to get this compellingness out, but if they could just meet this student, they would see how much potential they have. And so they were already teaching things like self-advocacy to these students. So the students were prepared to kind of advocate for themselves verbally. They are a pipeline for QuestBridge, right? And so I think QuestBridge had been kind of hearing about us through our network of networking with the community-based organization CBOs. And so, when Terry met with QuestBridge, and they were like, everyone in the world pre-COVID was reticent about video, but COVID really made us all more comfortable. Like, oh yeah,
Sure.
we can actually still get a human connection through video. And now it's just kind of, we get more human connection sometimes on video than we do in actual real life. So it just happened that because they do their own college prep scholars program, there's an application process to that. It was easy to pilot and say, let's go ahead and add Glimpse as an option for that application process, get our team comfortable with, does it add anything? And what they found was it does add. There are pieces of information that we are gathering from these videos that we didn't have in the written application. And so then they opened it up and said, okay, for the match application, we're adding it as well. Your question was, do all the partners have access? Yes, all of the partners have access to any of those links.
Yeah, that's got to be great for you as a way for more schools to say, hey, we want to open this up to like they get exposure. You get exposure to all 52 of those schools. Many of their competitors are already using it. And then from there, they see the value, and then they want to roll it out to all of their applicants. I can just so see that you guys are going to explode next year. I can just see it. It's coming. Get ready for it.
I mean, we're
we're
excited
investing
about
in the
it.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations with our technical team about the behavior of students and when they will be recording. It's not a scheduled thing, so we have to be ready on those deadline days, just like the
Sure.
Common App has to be ready
You
on
can't
deadline
crash.
days.
You can't crash the
That's right.
24 hours before. Yeah. So there's a couple criticisms I've heard. I want to share them with you and get your thoughts. One actually came in from one of our listeners because I announced it that I was going to interview guys on Monday. And very engaged listener, very attentive, sharp guy out of Texas, Asian American, and he's very concerned that this could be a tool used to discriminate against Asian Americans in the process. Like, visually, I can see you're Asian. Oh, we have enough of you. And so the way he worded it was because he asked me, can you please ask this question? And so he said, do colleges that use Glimpse open themselves up for potential lawsuits? But I can tell you from the back and forth we had before, he threw about 4 or 5 questions out to me before. And I'm like, I can't ask that. It's going to be an obvious no answer. But I said, there's a way maybe I can get at your question that could lead to a conversation. Of course, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Gloria, you're Asian, so I know you're not going to be involved in something that you feel would discriminate against Asians. But, and I shared that. He's like, yeah, I know, I did my homework, because he really does his research. But it doesn't mean the schools, she might not, but it doesn't mean the schools won't. So,
Yeah.
so first of all, have you heard that before or from anybody? And how do you respond to that?
Well, this is to the extent that this is kind of a legal question that is going to be a little bit in my domain. And so I'll kind of do my best to respond to that. It's because before we,
Hey, Terry, why don't you, people may forget about your background. Why don't you share that of the legal part?
yeah, well, I mean, before we did Initial View, I was a lawyer, and did that for I think about 6 years, and so I'll respond to that. I mean, there have been times, certainly when we speak to general counsels at universities about whatever it is that we're doing, and this question has come up, and there's a lot of ways to kind of underscore what kind of the post SCOTUS environment is like. I mean, to try and, again, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I can talk a little bit about it. Of course, the kind of the check the box use of race in admissions decisions was deemed unconstitutional, and this is the when we do a glimpse. I mean, we're not collecting race. We don't. That's not part of the process. The student can decide to hide they can turn off the screen so that their face is not shown. Colleges can do that too. Of course, that's also an optional part of the process. It's not. I think that also it's, even if you were to use this to try and figure out the race, like oftentimes it's hard to figure out the race of someone that you're talking to in video. So even that is certainly imperfect. If colleges, to be completely frank, if they wanted to find other ways to manipulate with a scalpel, racial makeup of their class, there are much better ways to do it. There's with the wealth of demographic information that they have, like, it would be much easier to do that, by boosting certain admission rates at different types of high schools and things like that. So it's not. We would, I know, of course, colleges are not using it that way. We don't provide them with any of that data. It'd be very hard from the video itself to determine that. But also, let's not forget that the Supreme Court opinion did allow for students to talk about their race and to connect that to their experience and skills that they had developed. Challenges that they had overcome, aspects of their identity, that was explicitly allowed in the Supreme Court, opinion. So, students, I think, can come to this very free. They do not need to be worried about, how this is just a proxy for something else. Now do admissions offices, like, do they need to be thoughtful in how they do their review process? I mean, of course, the answer is yes, and they are thoughtful about it. I mean, now I'll say as well. I mean, this is not. We work with institutions that are some of the most we'll call them brands, right? Like some of the most valuable brands in the world. They're very thoughtful about changes to their process, and so they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't feel comfortable about it. And we absolutely want to assure students that they can just come and they can be themselves, and they can put themselves forward, and they can talk about whatever aspect of their identity that they want to talk about, and that is going to be completely fine. And I think that participants in this process, I'm not going to say that this process is the fairest process, or that it's a process that is going to give every applicant consideration the way that applicant wants to be considered. I'm not saying that that's the way that it is, but I am saying that it does absolutely comply with what the law is understood to be, and we certainly I think that the participants in this, on the one hand, they have to know that they're kind of putting themselves out there. They're going to be judged by admissions officers, and that getting rejection letters is never something which is a pleasant part of the process. But they can feel very good about, look, they just go and they do their best. At some point, every student has to be like, well, look, if I'm not, if it doesn't work out for me at such and such an institution, then I need to feel some level of confidence that institution wasn't right for me, and that I am, even though it's not an enjoyable way to get direction, I am getting direction, and I can now know, okay, good, I've got information. That was maybe something. Now I'm not going to waste time thinking about that. I can actually focus on other colleges where I can feel confident that it's going to be a better fit. And at the end of the day, it is a match process, and you want to be at a place that wants you. I mean, that is just an obvious statement, something that we often forget as we're so nervous about trying to be at a school with a certain level of prestige or whatever it might be. So I think that would be, schools in theory, they can still be, playing games behind the scenes. It's certainly not with our tool. And I actually don't think schools are doing it. I think that, that things have kind of settled post SCOTUS, and schools it kind of led to lots of experimentation. It led to schools having to be more thoughtful in how they ran their process. And for someone who is still concerned about race-based discrimination that would be in violation of the Constitution, I think that they can feel a lot better.
Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Gloria and Terry Crawford on Klim's Video. Hope you'll join us next week for the next segment.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Okay, friends, in part 3 of my interview with Fabrizio Delosio, we continue along the theme of how in the world UTK went from 17,000 apps to 60,000. But toward the end of the interview, we transition and we start really doing a deep dive into the culture, communication programs at the University of Tennessee. But Fabrizio talks about how they are effectively using technology like texting to move people along the admissions funnel. Fabrizio answers the question, are they using affinity scores and predictive modeling? Fabrizio answers the question, does he think there will be a growth of the use of affinity scores and predictive modeling and demonstrated interest within the public school sector? Fabrizio talks about how Tennessee has leveraged their top 10% plan, and he talks about what their top 10% plan is. Fabrizio answers the question, did you tweak your merit scholarship program? And if so, has that helped your growth? Fabrizio asks whether the growth of Tennessee has helped fuel their growth at the University of Tennessee. Fabrizio talks about the role of athletic success in supporting pride and tradition. Fabrizio talks about the alumni network and the role it plays. Fabrizio talks about the strongest programs located within their business department. Fabrizio talks about something that they have that's only for freshmen that's very exciting. And Fabrizio talks about why they don't care about rankings but he tells us what they do care about. Fabrizio talks about several brand new facilities that are about to go up on campus, and Fabrizio talks about the forensic department that is on campus. Listen and enjoy. So what else was on your list we haven't talked about things Tennessee did to go from 17 to 60,000?
Yeah, I think we covered most of it. I guess the only thing I'll add, which a lot of schools are doing, we just really leverage technology and data.
Yeah.
Like we purchased a new CRM system. We really leaned in on social media. My first few years here, we weren't texting. And I said, well, we got to change that. Like students aren't reading emails, so we text if there's a call to action, like we're missing items in your application, right? So I think leveraging that with everything else has made an impact.
So that just helps move people along the funnel wherever they are, right? From prospect to inquiry to applicant to, that's awesome. Now, are you doing much around sort of, affinity scores and engagement tracking and any of that stuff that, you see pretty prevalent in more, you see it more in the private schools than the public schools, but that's another tool that a lot of schools are using to identify people with a higher probability of enrollment and sort of micro targeting in the direction when you see the evidence of that engagement.
Yeah, we currently are not, with the exception of waitlist activity.
Okay.
So, all the way up through, application and submit and decisions for regular decision and early action have nothing to do with engagement scores. However, when we get to the point where we need to look at our melt and we see that we have some space, we look at programs and we look at what their engagement has been with us, those students, to then quickly kind of move students off the wait list and to offer them spots in the class. But currently, that's the only way we are using engagement scores.
So you're not using like a human capital to give you like an affinity score or anything like that.
No.
I'm just curious. This is a question off of Tennessee. Are you seeing public schools go to that? Because obviously that's much more prevalent with the private schools. I'm just curious, and we'll get back to Tennessee, but I'm just really curious to see when are the publics going to start doing some of the things the privates are doing, if ever. Are you're probably aware of the chatter out there? Do you see that being experimented with the publics, or do you feel like it just kind of doesn't work as much in that with this sector?
I think more publics are beginning to move that direction.
Yeah, I would expect that they would, because those who are doing it do see value to it. At least those who are doing it well. Yeah, and with the enrollment cliff and all the other forces coming at higher ed, it becomes that much more imperative that people have effective conversion rates, and I think you're see a lot more creativity in trying different things, right? Would you agree with that in general?
I do in general, absolutely. And I think, so Publix is a pretty broad swath too.
Sure.
Right? So like if you think about regional Publix,
very
many
different.
Regional Publix are not doing things like an infinity score.
Sure.
Maybe some of the larger Publix are the more selective Publix. And it's not even about, I don't want anyone to ever think like colleges are necessarily trying to keep students out, but rather scarce resources.
Sure.
Right? Like how do you manage your resources, identify the students that really want to be there? And so you're not mailing as much, you're not, right? It creates a lot of noise. And if we know who's really interested and is qualified, that helps us identify the best fits. But we are not using those scores currently. Now, does that mean we won't in a couple of years? We might get to that point, but we're not there yet.
Now, you guys have talk about your top 10 your 10% plan, and explain that to our listeners. And then, has that been a boon for applicant flow?
Yeah. So last year, the Board of Trustees for the Tennessee system campuses, they approved a guarantee policy. And that policy was if you had a 4.0 GPA, or you're in the top 10% of your class, and there's some fine print, and you graduate from a Tennessee school, right?
Right.
You get guaranteed admission to the university. Now, we were able to fine tune ours a bit. So for us, it's the top 10%, or you have a 4.0 UT core GPA, which we can talk about later, but we recalculate a GPA. So it needs to be our core GPA. And so we did see an increase in applications.
Mm-hmm.
Our yield, and you know this, whenever we see
Yeah.
you see a large increase in apps, the yield goes down.
Right.
So our yield for those students was not quite as high, because again, those are the best of the best students, right?
Sure.
We're going to lots of places, but we did see it had an impact in state.
How was it? Did you break out like maybe more rural parts? And I'll say something that I can say because he said it publicly at NACAC. I can't remember his name. The guy who replaced Mary Wagner at South Carolina. He did a presentation and I attended.
Scott Verzal?
Yes, Scott.
And he was actually Mary's boss at South Carolina.
Oh, he's Mary's boss. Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So he did a presentation and he talked about, of course, they have a top 10% plan, and they threw in some merit money for families making under 80,000. And he said it really didn't cost us very much because those kids were already getting a lot from us anyway. And they saw over 1,000 applicant increase in certain like rural demographics. Because, I think the high achieving kid from Nashville that's maybe looking at going out of state and doing a national search, that may be a harder kid to yield than someone who maybe I might not even go to college. I don't know. I wondered if you've seen any differences in sort of, certain populations when it comes to yield with that 10%.
Yeah, I think the students that we saw lower yield in were students that perhaps test scores were a little bit lower.
Right.
Test scores.
Sure.
Right, because they were applying to other schools and perhaps they were getting money from a test optional school.
Yep.
But in terms of students that have financial need or were below a certain income, we have excellent programs for in-state students. So if you're making less than $40,000 a year in-state, you get scholarship money, right? So those lower groups that would have come anyways, most likely, they were getting money based on their salary, their EFC at the time.
So Fabrice, I have one more question on this, and then I want to transition and talk to you about UTK and your strongest programs and things like that. But so Tennessee has merit money for out-of-state students.
We do.
To what degree did you tweak the merit money program? And that's also one of the things that, is a factor. I'm sure. Merit money. Money is an enrollment management tool, right?
Yeah. So we, my first few years here, it was kind of funny. My boss and I kind of chuckle about it. Like, we felt like we didn't have any 2 years that were the same. Like, we would always reevaluate how we were doing, were those resources doing what they needed to do? And I can tell you, they have a huge impact. They help students feel really good that they got money. It makes parents feel good. In some cases, that money is more needed than in other cases. It helps in our process. Let me back up too. We have a scholarship grid.
Mm-hmm.
So when you apply, you can assess roughly what your UT core GPA is going to be, and you know what your test scores are, and you can say, I'm likely going to get this amount of money. And that also has helped, I think, students say, you know what, I should apply.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's pretty clear. There's no secret veil where we're putting money on certain students for scholarship behind a room, like behind a closed door, right? Like, it is out there for everybody to see, what you might qualify for, most likely based on scores and GPA.
Do you feel the growth of Tennessee's helped you as well? Because Tennessee overall, Nashville area is booming. The tax, the no state tax and music and healthcare and all that stuff. Like it's seen more as a place people want to come relocate to, similar to how Georgia and North Carolina and South Carolina are, as opposed to, I don't see as much of that with, say, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, maybe. Do you think that plays a role, like the overall image of the state? And I bring that up because as someone who's constantly building college lists for people, a lot of times I'll just mention the name of a place and it's just dead on arrival. Like whatever the image people have of the state in their mind, it goes a long way toward whether I can even get someone to even consider a place.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. I think to some degree, but probably a small degree. Like, because if you look at the state,
right,
college going, like we're going to hit an all-time high in college going this year. Then it's going to start to decline.
Yeah.
Now, would it have declined at a faster pace if we hadn't brought in so many folks from different places? Maybe. So I think it to some extent, but I think it really comes down more to the students that are here are having phenomenal experiences. They're telling people, and all the stuff we talked about. And I think it's creating a brand. And I would say athletics is an enhancer to that, right? We talked about sports and pride. That's an enhancer. But even when our athletics program was not thriving like it is today, we went up from like 17,000 apps to 20,000, 19, and then 24,000. So we were already on that. But yeah. I do think kind of that brand, which is a lot of stuff. It's alums. We have a great alumni network. It's the students, it's parents, it's school counselors, all coming together at the right time with our athletic success.
And the SEC conference has a brand with football on national TV and all of that. And that looks like a lot of fun going to school there.
Yep. And then, we won a national championship in men's baseball. Last year, right? And we're going to have a great team this year, right? So that creates that sense, that helps support the pride, the tradition, the feeling like they're part of something bigger. And I think you're right. The SEC does that. So do some other conferences.
Sure.
I think it's just a little different in the SEC. And of course, I'm biased. We know that.
Of course, you should be. All right. Let's talk about some of your strongest programs. If you were to survey your current students, what would they regard as some of your strongest programs?
Yeah, so I think our business, Haslam College of Business, is extraordinarily popular among our students. Some really excellent programs at the graduate level and at the undergraduate level. Supply chain management, I think we're number 2 or 3 at the undergrad level, and same at the graduate level. Business analytics, right? Like really exceptional program. And with FedEx and UPS in Tennessee, and Amazon's building office, different spaces across the state, like business analytics, supply chain management. A lot of our business programs are in need. Engineering, right? So I think I'm from the Northeast, right? Originally. And I think there's kind of a feeling out there that schools or colleges of engineering in the Northeast, like that's where someone needs to go. I think there's some extraordinary schools up there, but there's some in the South too, right? And sure. I think we're one of them. Our Tickle College of Engineering, we've got all kinds of engineering. I'll highlight two that are particularly maybe not well known, but are very interesting. Aerospace engineering, we graduated astronauts. Nuclear engineering, again, exceptional. And that our Tickle College of Engineering has a building that's only 2 or 3 years old, state of the art. Maker spaces for first-year students, only for first-year students, to be able to do things. Nursing, we talked about this a little bit before the podcast. We have a direct admit nursing program, brand new building. It'll be ready, I think, in the fall. That's extraordinary.
And I think you're going to be able to take more kids, right? Like when I was there, you had like an 8% admit rate for nursing, but that was partly because you didn't have the space.
Yeah.
And now with this new space, you should be able to not accept more kids. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also placements, right? So for
Sure.
nursing, and to keep our accreditation, we need to have a certain number of placements for students.
Right.
So I think we've gotten some more placements. So that in combination with a new facility will help us admit. And these are, like you said, 8% admit rate. And again, I want to go back. I want to go back to what I said earlier. Like, we're not trying to decrease the admit rate and be more selective to move up rankings.
Yeah.
Honestly, at some level, we don't really, at some level, care about the rankings as long as we're doing right by our students and doing right by the state. However, if you don't have the placements and they need to have, right, like then that's going to impact the number you can take. If you don't have the residence halls, that's going to impact the number you can take, right? Because you need to make sure students have beds to sleep in. And we require first year students to live on campus. We're building 3 new residence halls. So it's all about preserving the experience. And that's
I really
kind of what
appreciate, Fabrizio, how you're highlighting specific programs. Like supply chain jumped off the chain for me of pardon the pun, but when I was on my visit to the school, that was one of the things I came away with was, wow, I didn't realize how strong supply chain was. But we have a lot of college counselors that listen, and when someone just says engineering, I think you can get lumped in with the oodles of schools that have engineering. But when you say, hey, take a look at aerospace and nuclear, as a college counselor, that's the stuff that really helps me think of you, keeps you top of mind when I'm working with someone that tells me they want aerospace.
Yeah, and well, you're in Atlanta. Jobs, NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
Atlanta is where he went to school in Atlanta, suburban Atlanta. He's an aerospace engineer. He works in the summer for NASA.
Wow.
Right during the off season. So great programs across the board. I do want to mention too that I think one, I'm sure people have heard about if they've watched television shows and movies. And the other one is just a new college, forensic anthropology, which is termed the Body Farm. Right, we have a graduate program at the Body Farm that's amazing around forensics, nationally, internationally recognized. If you watch that movie, The Blind Side, they're talking about it. The character that Sandra Bullock plays, College of Music. So we don't have a school of music. We have a College of Music.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we're the only public, I could be wrong, but I think we might be the only public in the state with a full-fledged College of Music.
Is that a draw for you? Is that are you finding people are selecting you and jumping a couple states because of, like, for example, College of Music? Yeah.
And what helps is with Nashville and country music, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a music business program, we've got music education. So it's not just performance per se. It can be some of those other more business focused music programs that Natalie College of Haslam College of Music partners with other colleges to make sure the coursework's available.
Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Fabrizio Delosio. Hope you'll join us next week for the next segment.
Friends, on Monday's episode, remember last week how I talked about how UPenn's generous new financial aid policy, I think, has potential to shake up the elite colleges and their packages moving forward? Well, I've been thinking a lot about that conversation, and I want to share some additional thoughts I've had this week after doing more thinking, doing more reading, more reflecting. There's just some things I didn't say that I want to add to that discussion. And then, friends, remember when I talked about taking 30 factors involved in building a college list and ranking them and how it will force you to think through this process for students and parents? Remember, I asked our listening audience to send in your ideas. What did I miss? Well, three or four things came in that I felt needed to be included, and I've had some more time to think. I thought about a couple more things myself, so I'm going to be walking you through my list now of the 30 things that I ask students and parents to think about and actually rank your top ones when it comes to what's most important to you when selecting a college. And then we'll have part 3 or 4 of Andy Stricker doing a deep dive for us on everything you want to know about early decision, where he answers 20 frequently asked questions about ED1 and ED2. Then we have a brand new interview. It's with the founder of Polygents, Jin Chao, It's a 3-parter. I think you're going to like it. Polygents helps high school students do special projects. It could be building an app. It could be designing a medieval costume, or it could be doing a research project. And they pair up high school students with some both grad school students as well as some real leaders in the field in very specific areas according to the interests of the students. So I think you're going to like that interview. I had fun really meeting Jen. She made me think. She's engaging. She's got a great personality. She's doing some exceptional work. And I look forward to you having part 1 of 3. Well, friends, sometimes I like to close out with something that I think one of our thought leaders, one of our interviewees said that was rather profound. And I'm going to do that again today. The only difference between this one and the past is this is an interview you haven't heard yet. It's with Christoph Gutentag, the Dean of Admission and 33-year veteran at Duke University. It's going to air at the start of January. But he dropped some real nuggets when I asked him for his advice for parents and counselors and students that you may be able to apply right now in the month of December. So without any further ado, we'll close with some words of wisdom from Christoph Gutentag.
So we always like to close with your best advice for our 3 constituencies, which are parents, college counselors, and students. Bequeath some wisdom on us, Christoph, in closing for parents, college counselors, and students.
I'll try to make it short. Parents, listen to your children. This is their process. If you give them the space to tell you what matters to them over time, it's not one conversation, it's a dozen conversations. If you listen to them and help guide them in the direction that they are inclined to go in any case, I think that makes for a successful college process. Get yourself and what you want out of it and center what your children want. And that happens by doing a lot of listening and questioning and talking less, listening more. That was parents. Counselors, my recommendation for counselors is to organize your letters of recommendation by what aspect of the student you are describing in paragraphs, and then put a space between each paragraph, an extra space between each paragraph, so that we know this paragraph is about this aspect of a student. This second paragraph is about this aspect of a student. This third paragraph can be about this aspect of a student. It can be short, it can be long. It can have more, it can have less, right? It's going to be about the student as an individual, but an organized letter from a counselor, I think, is very valuable, especially if we are reading 5, 10, 20 letters of recommendation from the same counselor or the same counseling team. It helps us understand each student in the context of the school. Students, have faith. Have faith. This will work out. You will find a place that you are happy and successful. Think about places where you both will feel comfortable and challenged. I think a successful college experience is one where you feel like home. You feel that it feels right to you, and also that you are going to be pushed, that you are going to be challenged, that you are going to be also outside of your comfort zone, because I think that's how we learn and that's how we grow and that's how we have a successful college career. So both of those things, and then hope that your parents listen to you.
See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Lynda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.